Welcome back, everybody. It is Wins Above Fantasy, episode 153. Today is Thursday, August 29th. I'm Van Burnett, joined as always by Steve Gisueli. If you've made it this far into the season, we can almost say happy playoffs or happy home stretch. And we've got a jam-packed show for you all and extremely actionable. So get the pen and paper out. We are going to be going through different categories and talking about under-rostered guys who are probably out there on the free agents on the waiver wire that can help you in almost any category: power, speed, average, flipping over to pitchers for ratios, strikeouts, saves. Going to be a fantastic topic. Got about 25 names here and their rostership. We've got some reasons to believe, at least as of late. And then 'tis the season to look at the upcoming matchups. So we're going to be looking at what offenses or pitching they face on the docket. So very exciting show, Steve. It's exciting times for us because we are in the trenches. I know I was blowing your phone up last week in full on anxiety, at least until my Sunday seance where I went a watched pot never boils and pretty much took a hiatus for 7 hours when you're like, what's the update over there? But I survived it, survived the matchup, only to get Bailey Oberg on Monday, which you did too. And we're talking our home leagues, of course, but that's all the marbles for you and I, Steve. So we're in it, and it's good to be talking baseball. It's almost therapeutic. And how's it going over there? How's the sanity check?
It is. It's good. And yeah, if you made it this far, if you're still listening to fantasy baseball shows, if you're still actively checking your team, like you're doing something right. Like you're playing for something. You're probably chasing down standings, trying to make the leap in your roto leagues. It's head-to-head playoffs. I know that's the case for you and I in our home leagues. It's an intense time of year. Like I follow box scores and watch updates and watch baseball through the Score app and the MLB at Bat app far too often, but it goes to a different level during playoff time. It's funny, like usually around this time, like when you wake up and there's like a random 60-degree morning rather than like the 80-degree heat. Funny enough, today in the New York, New Jersey area, it was back to like the mid-July scorcher weather. But most sports fanatics, most normal sports fanatics get in gear for like football, and that's a week away. For us, it becomes just even more intense of fantasy baseball playoffs and home stretch. So it's an exciting yet stressful time. But if you're here, if you're still chasing for something, congratulations, because it's a grind, and to even get to this point is
absolutely
is not easy. And there's definitely other things to play for than just for winning. Like I actually just read Fantasyland. I don't know if you ever read it. It's a pretty old book.
No,
it's just about it was about like the start of like tout wars. And Sam Walker was a baseball writer, never played fantasy. Basically tried to use his access before fantasy baseball was like super popular with like all media members and everything like that to win tout wars. And he wasn't in at the end, but like he was trying to be the rookie of the year, quote unquote, beat out I think it was Joe Sheehan of Baseball Perspective. It was his first year in the league. So there, and it was a sort of race that he, said in his head that he was going to have at the end of the year. So there's always things to play for just in head-to-head playoffs. And when you're chasing down a top roto standing, it's always just super intense. Like every at bat is just every out. It's just crazy. Like that Ober start, you hinted at it. I was getting gas. And as I was done filling up gas, as I closed my window and received like my receipt, I just started screaming no, like as loud as I could
in public.
If the gas attendant in New Jersey, we don't pump gas, we have gas attendants. Fun fact. But if he heard me, like he just must have been like, what did he do wrong? Like, what is going on? It was just absolutely insane to deal with that on a Monday. Dude. It was tough, but hey, we're in it. It's intense and hoping to survive this week too.
Yeah. I'll spare the expletives. I opened up my phone and saw my opponent overstating that his week was over against me, and I immediately went to his team, and he had Zach Wheeler, who had given up 2 runs in 4 innings. I was like, "Oh, that's not that bad." And then I clicked my team, and I'm like, "Oh my!" Like the nerve to text that when I had Ober going on. But yeah, you're right, Steve. If anyone's here this late, it is a congratulations on being in the final grind and being in an elite company of fantasy baseball that can pretty much make it to September. And on top of that, if you're listening to the show, you're in an elite company that's tuning in with WAF. So we would ask you guys to go out, if you don't mind, give us a rating and review. It goes a very long way for us. And you guys, as always, can follow us on Twitter at WinsAbovePod. I'm at Van_verified. Steve is at Stav8818. But Steve, let's talk about the topic, the rundown. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but this time of year, we're looking for any help we can get, and it's a specific kind of help, which was kind of the impetus of this show, where we're going to be jumping through categories, talking guys, and a good majority of them are rostered in under 50% of Yahoo leagues. There's a handful that are above that, but every now and then those guys are available too. What's your 2 cents on the topic before we dive in?
Yeah, we're kind of copying like the meat and potatoes of an On the Wire podcast. Like they do this every week for like weekly fab. And it's just a great format of rundown to sort of find team specific needs, because you do that sort of on a weekly basis. I know our show and what we play and the most popular way of playing, even though it's sometimes easy to forget with how many NFBC leagues there are just throughout the industry, is more of a daily ad sort of, okay, maybe it's a daily waiver wire, maybe it's a twice or 2-3 times weekly waiver wire, maybe it's first come first serve with the waiver wire. That's like the default Yahoo platform, which probably is most popular. But I think it would be cool to, especially for these last few weeks, to cater to that, because we're at the time where like not only like injures guy droppable, but like basically anybody that's not like running at an extremely hot pace, other than like the true like first 5 rounder guys for next year, is droppable. Like a lot of your roster is more droppable than you think. So there's a lot of moves that you can make depending on what you need, whether that's trying to flip a category over the weekend in a head-to-head matchup, trying to make up ground where you have a lead and average but need some steals or whatever. So to sort of cater to an ad show for more daily leagues, I think is a fun idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it's like if in the regular season you're looking at 3-week samples and hoping they can give you 2 or 3 weeks of a good run, it all shrinks here, where you're looking at who's been hot in the past like week or so and what could they do even for the next few days if you're in a head-to-head league. But yeah, without further ado, I think we jump in, because like I said in the top, we got a long list here, and it starts with the pop. And Eugenio Suarez, Steve, that's a WAF name right there.
Mm-hmm.
This is 167% rostered and 10 homers in July. I mean, checking notes here, this guy's been that hot for in August. And yeah, like you've got here on the rundown, best offense since All-Star break. Look nowhere else than the D-backs. So that is Suarez. And yeah, I mean, it's in terms of upcoming opponents, they've got the Dodgers, they've got at the Giants, at Houston, and then Texas. So kind of a mixed bag in there in terms of just good teams, good rotations. But overall, he could continue to do some damage there. But Suarez, it's not the typical, bright red stat cast that we're used to seeing for him. I know he's kind of wavered, certainly with average in the past 3 or 4 years, but the barrel rate season wide is down, by his standards to like 10%, where in the past it's been much higher. But yeah, you can't knock that now 20 homers on the season, and he's definitely been running hot with this Diamondbacks run. So do you think this 67% rostered is low, or where's your head at?
I was surprised it was that high, right? Like Eugenio Suarez for the first half was like an afterthought, but I guess he's been so good for so long, and I guess shame on us for not really
We breezed over it a
talking
little bit.
about. Yeah, we breezed over a little bit. I think we brought him up a little bit in July, but he really sustained that pace. It's just 1131 OPS with 10 homers is like one of the best months, like outside of Judge, for anyone in baseball, right? Like that's
like the old Matt Kemp type of run.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think 67% is a little high for what we wanted to target on this show as far as like rostership percentage. And the rosterships are Yahoo, I think, as you mentioned. But I think it's a good segue into leading into wanting to get a share of the Diamondbacks offense at any cost possible. And this tweet was from Underdog a few days ago. The Diamondbacks in the second half, their ranks in offensive categories: runs first, average second, OBP first, slug first, homers third, stolen bases ninth. So yeah, any way you want to get a hold of that Arizona offense, do so, and don't stream against them. I know they were kind of a target earlier in the year, but obviously do not do that. We'll get to some pitchers to target instead later on.
Yeah, and it's not this show that we're doing this, but it is worth noting that Suarez, you feel like you have him pegged, right? Kind of a poor man's Kyle Schwarber or something like that.
Sure, yeah.
292 batting average since the All-Star break.
Yeah.
And his strikeout rate has dropped from June, it was in 31%, down to 25% in July and 23% in August. So kind of already a little bit. That's the other thing this time of year. You can start filling out the offseason thoughts on like who might have a little bit of a narrative. But Suarez, color me surprised as well, Steve. I did not realize that. But let's keep rolling here with other sluggers. Had to throw MJ Melendez on the rundown here, 29% rostered. Another guy kind of surprising with average, of course, small sample size, could just be running hot, but the past couple weeks, a 308 batting average, of 3 homers. Similar to Suarez, really, that his Savant page was bright red in years leading up to this year, and it's down a little bit.
Early in the year too, I remember like when the Royals started hot, I was all about MJ Melendez because
you're right.
He was up there in barrel percentage. Like there was a bunch of Royals that were, and that's just sort of a lesson of how these small sample sizes can be a little tricky early in the year, even with these metrics that quote unquote stabilize early. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No. I mean, the other thing I was going to mention, which sometimes this can be a little bit skewed, but that his XBA on the season is 251 over his 215 average. So I think, maybe we're seeing that start to come around. He's got a couple multi-hit games in his past 4. And it's a name he hits in the heart of a pretty good lineup there. And at least in Yahoo, he carries the C. So if you're looking for a catcher, Melendez could add some help there. My question, Steve, looking at these upcoming matchups at Houston, Cleveland, the Twins, and the Yankees, just how would you grade this strength of schedule? Because Cleveland's getting a little bit even Boyd and Gavin Williams, kind of middling. And the Astros, historically we're like, oh, watch out for the Astros. And Fromber's been better, but do we still view the Astros as a trouble matchup?
Yeah, especially with how good Arrighetti has been down the stretch. And
that's true. Yeah.
And same with
Blanco.
Hunter Brown, basically. Blanco's faded a little bit, but still has been more than fine. And I mean, Hunter Brown's been like an ace essentially since he was the worst pitcher in baseball for the first month and a half of the year. So
that's a strong fade. Yeah.
I think it's interesting with the Royals, and I know this is just sometimes noise and it's a small sample and there's not really much to it as far as what we could do to predict things from year to year. But the fact of the matter is that the Royals are much better at home than they are on the road as an offense for
which
whatever
is weird.
reason.
It's weird at the park.
Yeah, it is. And the Kauffman Stadium, it's bad for homers, but it's such a big outfield that it's actually good for hits. And I think extra base hits too. So it's kind of sneaky, a hitter's park in that sense.
That's true.
So at home, the Royals have a 107 WRC plus. Away, the Royals have a 96 WRC plus. So a decent split there, and that's just the team as a whole there in general. So yeah, it's interesting. It's nothing to me that would like, and playing in Yankee Stadium as a lefty is always enticing. So like, there are some good matchups in the Twins with Joe Ryan banged up. Have taken a hit to their pitching staff. So nothing that would make me want to shy away from Melendez, especially if you needed a catcher. I know like Wilson Contreras just went down. I was considering Melendez. I actually went Shea Langoliers just based on sort of like it was a coin flip, but close. That was just basically my other second consideration. So
fair. Well, keeping on the power guys, Steve, I'm proud this one's on the rundown because a month ago, this was one of my guys for our little mini game on predicting waiver wire heroes on the stretch run with our little Razzball exercise that we said we're going to come back to end of the season. It's Matt Wallner, who came up and was mashing near the end of July, wondering if it was going to stick around or, fall flat. Like he's pretty volatile hitter, but last 24 games, 296 average, 5 homers. Talk to me about Matt Wallner, just 14% rostered on Yahoo. And yeah, this guy hits the balls about as hard as anybody. So that seems low to me.
Yeah. I mean, 24 homers in basically 125 games between last year and this year. And that's counting like, I know it was a super small sample when they basically sent him down from the start of the season when we were pretty, we were pretty excited about him.
Yeah, definitely. Both of us. Yeah.
But if you take away the qualified number on Baseball Savant on their
leaderboard,
bat tracking leaderboard,
yeah.
I believe Matt Wallner, he is 6th behind on average bat speed behind guys like Giancarlo Stanton, O'Neill Cruz, John Hensky, Noel, and then Matt Wallner. Pedro Leon is actually in there with only a few swings. He's 4th, so that's an interesting name there for for the Astros. So yeah, there's no questioning this guy's power, right? Like all of the Savant sliders, if he were as qualified, are like 95th percentile or better. It's that shade. Now the K rate is bad at 37. But he doesn't chase that much. He does take a walk. Like this could be like a
original Matt Olson for the
or like
Athletics,
or like a Brent Rooker sort of profile if you can get down to like 30-ish% strikeout rate. So I'm pretty intrigued by Wallner and the fact that he's only rostered in 14% of Yahoo leagues. Like if you're chasing homers at all, like you should be all about adding Matt Wallner.
Yeah, it's one of those where like even you add him as you're listening to this, decent chance he's going to get you one through Sunday for a matchup. So that's Wallner. Jumping around, another name I believe we talked about on that same show, if I recall, was Kerry Carpenter. And Carpenter a little bit more rostered at 55%. And another guy that we loved coming into the season, Steve. But the Tigers they got the Red Sox at the Padres, at Oakland, and then Colorado. So I kind of like this run of games a little bit more.
Oh, yeah.
And Carpenter has definitely been running hot. Talk to me about what you're seeing here with Kerry Carpenter.
Yeah, it was a shame that he was out for so long with that. I think it was a stress reaction in his lower back because basically all year he's been hitting. The one caveat is that all year that he's been playing in the 62 games, he has a 929 OPS. So that's essentially what 40% of the season, right? Of a 929 OPS
and still 13 homers. Yeah.
The thing is though, he does not play against lefties, or very, very rarely does. I think he has only 20 at bats this year, which is kind of disappointing. Like I liked Kerry Carpenter as a late round flyer because his small sample versus lefties wasn't too bad.
You're
Like,
right.
it was like
You're right.
85 WR. It wasn't like a 40 WRC plus. It was like it was bad, not like
Yeah, he
I
hit
must bench this
235.
guy bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was what was kind of exciting for me. I think they're just going to continue to sit him versus lefties since he's coming back from a major back injury. To like, okay, like this is the lefties are your days to rest, right? Essentially from with that. So, but still, I mean, he's got a 314 average versus righties with 13 home runs and 169 at bats, 188 plate appearances. So, yeah, like a third of the season. That's essentially, a third of a season's worth of plate appearances, a 36 homer pace for Kerry Carpenter. So,
Well, and that's one that, like, the power you're getting is it's different from the others because you're getting average as well. So I think with Carpenter, while he's not going to be in every single game, you are going to get a little bit better ratios than you're going to get with a guy like theoretically Matt Wallner or some of the other ones. So next on that list, speaking of, is Andrew Vaughn, which honestly, a little surprised that Andrew Vaughn is on the list just because it seems like the White Sox are a little bit of the black hole. And Vaughn is just kind of like constantly in purgatory for me, where this year it's just pretty ho-hum, 15 homers, 246 average. But I guess in the last month, he's got 4 homers. He's hitting 286. So that's one that has a little bit more to it in terms of the average, like we were talking about. And yeah, I think it's an interesting one to add in. He's got, in terms of upcoming matchups, he's got the Mets, he's got at Baltimore, at Boston, and Cleveland. So I would grade that as a difficult, but not the worst run of the names we've talked about. And like you have here, Steve, Vaughn had 10 barrels over his last 30 days, 21st in the majors. So that's kind of the eye popper and probably why he was thrown on this list. So that is Vaughn. And moving on to the final one that we have for power candidates, it is Jesus Sanchez. And Sanchez is one that we've been keeping an eye on all year because he's had a interesting looking StatCast page all year. And it's kind of been one that has built us up to let us down in a way. I know I rolled the dice with him on NFBC on multiple occasions. But if you kind of covered the back of the baseball card and just looked at the 13.4% barrel rate, the 95th percentile hard hit rate, the 89th percentile bat speed, you'd be a little disappointed to see just a 242 average and 17 homers for Jesus Sanchez. But he's an interesting one. I think in the offseason, you see the 17 homers, the 9 steals, and what he's done what he's got under the hood in terms of the batted ball data. This is kind of a interesting sleeper. As for what he can do right away for you, he's got at San Francisco, then home against the Nationals, home against the Phillies, and then at Pitt. So I do think those last 2 matchups are pretty difficult for Sanchez when you're looking at Philly and then at Pitt. But at least on a short-term streamer, I think Sanchez is totally viable at just 4% rostered. And you pointed out, Steve, 9 barrels over his last 30 days. But more importantly, I know, again, it's not this show. I think Sanchez is a name to kind of monitor in the offseason because the underlying data looks great. He's offers some power speed. The average isn't a huge, tank on your lineup, and he's just 26 years old. So if he could get out of Miami eventually, he'd be a lot more interesting. But yeah, open your thoughts on either Vaughn or Sanchez. They're both names that they've just been out there all year. So you're not that excited about them, but it's impressive to see that, this is the stuff you fall asleep on a little bit sometimes.
They're lesser roster guys, which I think is intriguing for deeper leagues. But they've been pretty good. Sanchez's raw power, I think he had the longest home run in the majors, if I'm not mistaken, recently. 480 feet. I don't even think that was at Coors. Surprisingly enough, I think it was in Miami, which is impressive. So, guys that have just been hot that like you kind of just glance over. And I know we were kind of looking at for Wallner, Melendez, Carpenter, like guys that have actually produced over the last few weeks. These guys are their results may not be as good, but their process is as good with those barrels there. So
and I mean, and what I mentioned with Vaughn and Carpenter is that at least recently for Vaughn, they're giving you a little bit of average too that you might not expect from some of the other guys. So it's like even if you don't get the homer you're signing up for on short term, you can hope for like 250 plus type of average. So that's those guys. And a couple interesting names in here that we'll be talking about in the offseason too. We're jumping over to speed, and we'll look at a handful of guys that can help on the base paths, but we're going to take our first ad break. We'll be right back after this. Okay, so Steve, another name we've been talking about throughout the season, Pete Crow Armstrong. I know the Chicago Cubs back around All-Star break when we did that too early strength of schedule episode, we had the Cubs circled as like the number one best matchups or the easiest strength of schedule. And it's been interesting to kind of see some beneficiaries of that, whether it's like Dansby Swanson. I know Seiya Suzuki almost destroyed me in the playoffs. But Pete Crow Armstrong is one that's surging. He just clearly had some growing pains early on, but 4 homers and 7 steals over his last 26 games, 276 average. And my favorite part about Pete Crow Armstrong, especially along with some of the other names we'll be talking about, is his matchups at Washington and then home against Pittsburgh. Those are 2 teams that are like the bottom 8 in terms of allowing stolen bases. So at just 27% rostered, I think Pete Crow Armstrong is a great bet to help you if you're in an absolute dogfight on trying to win steals in a head-to-head matchup, or if you're trying to make up some categories in Roto. But talk to me about Pete Crow Armstrong, Steve. I don't have any shares. I wish I did, but I do have some stolen base battles, and I think he's out on the wire. So it's a really good name.
Yeah. I forget who the Cubs traded at the deadline, or if they did, or they just decided to just start playing him. But essentially, since the trade deadline, they kind of said, maybe even a little before that, they just said like, this is Pete Crow Armstrong's job, and he's running with it, and he's literally doing that. 7 steals over the last 26 games. Only 27% Yahoo rostered at Yahoo. That's way too low. He's been really, really good. Like Jackson Merrill, Jackson Churio, like level of good since the All-Star break. I know a lot of people have been talking about how good those guys have been over the last few weeks, but Pete Crow Armstrong is up there too with how good he's been. In the past 25 games, it's a 333 batting average, 4 home runs, 7 steals, 17 runs, 16 RBIs, 5 doubles, and 2 triples. That was also an Underdog tweet. Like if you guys are getting tweeted out by Underdog, the lineup account that sends out notifications and everything, they're doing good. So
I'm guessing that's the Christopher Morel to the Rays, Steve.
Yes. Morel was playing third,
but just the way they were moving around.
And I guess that sort of freed up the lineup spot for him. But
in one way or another,
one way or the other, they decided to start playing Pete Crow Armstrong a lot, and it's been good.
Yep. Because I think that moved Suzuki possibly to DH and then opened up outfield.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because Suzuki they don't want in the outfield, so they were playing Morel a lot at DH because they didn't want him at third. There you go. There's the domino effect there.
Well, speaking of Rays, Jose Caballero, 41% rostered and has been playing every day since the trade deadline. 10 steals, Steve, over the past 30 days. I've seen his name popping up more and more on the the push notifications for like MLB steals on Twitter, but I did not realize it was 10 over 30 days. His upcoming matchups: San Diego, Minnesota, at Baltimore, at Philly, Little Coldwater. All 4 of those I think are like bottom 10 teams in terms of stolen base allowed, but it's like still when you're running that wild, who cares if you get caught once, if you're trying to grab 3 or 4 bags. So talk to me about Caballero. Anything of note here other than what we've talked about?
Another guy that has been playing a lot more since the trade deadline, which is nice because sometimes the Rays bring in these guys and they lose their playing time. But he's basically started every game from the All-Star break on, and there's games of 2 stolen bases, 3 stolen bases. So like they come in bunches, and he's attempted 50 steals. I know that's something that you like to look at. I mean, he's been caught 13 times, which is a lot, but the intent is there. So he's going to be going, and it's just, I know he's playing a lot now, but it's just like 400, like 390 plate appearances. So it's, not the full amount of playing time that everyone has had, that he's accumulated those 37 steals. So, it might be a drain on average, might be a drain overall. The Rays haven't been great offensively, but he does have 9 homers. So like, it's not, 0. It's not Billy Hamilton level power. But I think that if you need steals, Caballero is a guy that should definitely be rostered. 41% at Yahoo. I know he started off pretty hot, had a bunch of steals early, so that's probably why that percentage is pretty high. It's sort of for guys that start off well, their percentages jump up, rather than Caballero did this recently. Like the next guy we're going to talk about, they're probably a lot more readily available.
Yeah, well, it's Victor Robles and the now Seattle Mariner, Victor Robles. I can't think of this guy without thinking of DVR over at Rates and Barrels. It's the permanent hoping for the breakout, betting on it. 20 steals on the season for Robles and a 269 average. What's going on with the playing time, Steve? I mean, is this somebody
he's been banged up? He's been banged up recently. But other than that, I mean, the Mariners have been so bad offensively that you kind of just have to, assume that when he's healthy, he's going to be in the lineup. Like, he's been not only like their best source of steals, but like one of their best hitters recently. Like, it's cooled off in the last 20 or so games, but he still does have 2 homers and 8 steals. I think he homered again today. So I don't know if that's counting those 2, or it may be 3. So
hitting second in the lineup, and
hitting second,
7% rostered. Yeah, this is a pretty good one. And he's got the Cardinals slated, and they're also one of like the bottom 5 teams on stolen bases allowed.
Although a lot of that probably is Contreras, right? Who's not great defensively. So maybe without him, it might be a bit of a tougher ask. But I don't know if Herrera is that great at throwing out runners, or I think Pages is their other catcher. But it's hard to be worse than Contreras, at least at throwing out runners and defensively. So we'll see there. But definitely an interesting name, and should be rostered more than 7% with how right. What's the total on his steals? It's 27. That's insane.
No, I think 20 on the season.
20 still.
That's a lot.
67 games. 20 steals. That's
what's crazy is that sprint speed, 59th percentile, and seeing that he's got that kind of a clip and only been caught once. So, I mean, he's crafty, turning into a veteran now. 8 seasons for Victor Robles. But the Mariners, man, is there another team that has a more lopsided like pitching versus hitting?
No.
You just look at
It's
that
funny.
name and it's like polar opposites on if it's a good matchup or bad matchup based on
It's funny.
offensive.
We'll get to it. It's a good resource, and Nick's Pollock's lists now turned into basically essentially a long streaming list with like matchups listed and ranks them based on that, like the 4 or 5 starts they have left for the season. Every single Mariner is like the light blue, ace essentially. And I think if you would do the same exercise for hitters, like it would
Maroon.
be Victor Robles, whatever you get out of Julio Rodriguez, just because you need to have him despite the lost year it's been.
Yeah.
And then everybody else you wouldn't want. It's
Well,
just funny.
on Fangraphs, where they have like on roster resource, like the overall power rank, they have 2 hitters within the top 150. No, 160. So you got Randy Arozarena 85th, Cal Raleigh at 70th, and then just obviously like Julio's in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a rough offense. But keeping it moving here, another Ray talking Josh Lowe, who 55% rostered, 4 steals. He had a 2-week run with 4 steals, and this past week, I don't think he had one, but he's also had a 293 batting average in the past month with an 844 OPS. I know there was that 2 homer game in there, which helped. Low is about as volatile as it gets, but a guy who I think feast or famine, honestly, Steve, I might look to add him if he's available, because he's the type that if you need to catch lightning in a bottle, like there's a pretty high ceiling there if Josh Lowe gets going. But he had a homer today, homered a couple days ago as well. So, you're going to get strikeouts as well. But Josh Lowe, 55% rostered, good option here as well, right?
Yeah, last 30 days, 3 homers, 8 steals, 293 average, 844 OPS. He has 17 steals and caught just once on the year. Like when he first came back from injury, I think a few weeks ago, the power really wasn't coming, and it was just a lot of steals that was kind of floating his value. Now it looks like the bat's starting to come around too, as multi hits and homers in 2 of his last 3 games. So there's going to be a ton of strikeouts. That's kind of what was the profile was last year too. But I mean, in the 2 seasons combined between this year and last year, he has 49 steals to just 4 caught stealing. So it is a good time to add Josh Lowe, I think, if he's available, because it's kind of a steals profile that's going to give you probably a little bit more of everything else too.
Only hard part is the Padres staff has been a buzzsaw lately. He's got the Padres, then the Twins, then at Baltimore, at Philly. So that's the only thing is a decently tough. I mean, I think Minnesota is probably the lighter part of that, but between Padres, Philly, and Baltimore, some tough rotations that he's going to be up against. But
Baltimore's been kind of fading here, especially in the pitching department too. Burns has not been that good in the second half. And I know they just lost Eflin too, I think, to the IL. I think maybe he's coming back soon. But it's and for lefties too, you don't have to deal with Baltimore there. So it's still a decent.
You're right. I think Baltimore's honestly
lefties.
compared to
and Philly's a great hitters park too. So maybe not as bad of a schedule as it seems
that's fair
for the Rays there.
Yep. So the last one we want to talk about, and I dropped him in speed, Steve, but it's kind of an interesting one all around, is Dylan Cruz called up this week. He homered today as we record this on Wednesday, led off, hit second in another game. Popular prospect, you guys have probably heard the name, but 60 grade speed. He's got the Cubs at Miami, at Pitt, and then Miami again. So Dylan Cruz for the Nationals, pretty soft schedule. And again, in the spirit of catching lightning in a bottle, we've seen, guys get called up and it go one way or another, where it either isn't working out or they go berserk. And it's, a talking point all over Twitter. There's still quite a chance to get Dylan Cruz at 36%. Steve, what are your thoughts on Cruz? We haven't talked about him on the show.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I'm glad you put him in the speed play because the Nationals lead the league in stolen bases. They just have a green light for everyone. James Wood has 3 steals today alone against me in my playoff matchup. I'm not too happy about that. But yeah, the Nationals just go on the base pass. It's pretty cool to see. They have 182 steals. The Reds have 178, which a lot of that is due to one player. And then the next team, and basically the next tier is 164 for Milwaukee and 153 for the Rays. So it's good that Dylan Cruz is on a Nats team that is going to basically allow a guy with his speed and his stolen base ability. I think he was 30 for 35 in the minors this year. He's going to have a green light essentially with essentially basically the Rays or the Nats are just, they're not going to hold anyone back on that. And sorry, he is 25 for 30, not 30 for 35.
Still in 100 games, 25 steals, and he had a stolen base, I should have mentioned yesterday as well. So Cruz, look out. Switching over to the average category. This will be the last one here for hitters, and then we'll get into pitchers as well. But wanted to shout out Parker Meadows, Steve, because this is one that I feel like we've been talking about this name just as an industry. And it's kind of been, I don't know. I mean, I was really excited about him, and then it looked like the strikeout rate was rough and the average was rough, but it caught my attention when I'd heard that he had reduced his strikeout rate quite a bit since being down in the minors. In terms of raw tools, like he's another guy that could have been in the speed category because he's got 94th percentile sprint speed, 9 steals on the season, but he also offers some pop. And for Meadows, past month, he has a 329 average, 5 steals in that time. So yeah, I think he's a good one for average here. And upcoming games, Boston, at San Diego, at Oakland, and then home against the Rockies. But yeah, just 11% rostered. I think Parker Meadows is another name we're going to be talking about throughout the offseason, just 24 years old and showing some of that upside. But what are your 2 cents on Meadows?
Yeah, he was a popular like laid outfield sleeper for draft and hold. Last sort of offensive player picked in deeper like TGFBI and stuff.
Yeah.
He was a good sleeper, and I think for good reason, because he just has a good amount of tools like across the board. Barrels the ball and hits the ball pretty hard. Has some speed, good max exit velocity. Like, just
dude, look at his splits. Split, if you go over his splits pre-All-Star game, batted 131, and now he's batting 329 since the All-Star break. I mean, granted, these are small sample size, but holy cow, man! Like those are some crazy numbers. Completely dropped.
In AAA too, it seems like he figured something out. They sent him down, worked on stuff. He only struck out 19% of the time, walked 13% of the time, had a 129 WRC plus, 8 homers, and 19 steals too in AAA too. So could be a decent source there. I think this is a good name to keep in mind for the stretch run and for like a deeper play. I think a lot of like people have been waiting for Detroit to sort of take that next step. They have a lot of the pieces. They have a lot of interesting arms. They have an ace in Skubal and one of the best pitchers in the league. Not only an ace, but I think that Meadows could be an interesting player down the stretch, an interesting sleeper, and I could see Detroit being like a popular like, hey, this is the team that's going to take the next step next year. Just because there are a lot of nice hitters that should reach some potential, right?
Yeah. But wrapping up on average, especially on the splits, Parker Meadows early on, it was all expected, everything as dreadful as he was, but his XBA in July and August has been 325, and 320. So definitely an average plus, which is this category. Steve, you threw Masataka Yoshida on here, 71% rostered. He has been terrific.
Yeah, it's a little bit high. Yeah, for this show, I didn't realize how high he would be, but yeah, he's
nonetheless. I know he's out there in some leagues. Like he just got scooped a couple weeks back in mine, but last month hitting 333, and yeah, at the Tigers, at the Mets, then White Sox and Baltimore, which is definitely better back half there. Geraldo Perdomo is a good one though, because you talked about the D-backs and their surge, but 337 average the past month and 283 on the season. He's got the Dodgers, at the Giants, at Houston, and then the Rangers. Talk to me about Perdomo. This is one that never really like moves the needle for me. I kind of just like maybe wrongfully have him chalked as like just a guy, but do you think this one, in comparison to some of the other names we talked about, is actionable? Like, would you pull the trigger on a guy like this?
Honestly, I think so. Just to get a part of the Arizona offense, right? Like it's sort of like I'm not picking up the player, I'm picking up the situation.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
That being said, there's not really many series that I'm excited doing that. Like home versus the Dodgers. I know the Dodgers have had some pitching woes, and Glasnow's currently hurt, but I think he's throwing again this Friday. At San Francisco's is bad of a ballpark that you can go to. But again, you're not really picking up Perdomo to hit like a homer. You're more of getting, you want some hits, want some runs, and maybe luck your way into an RBI, an extra base hit or something like that. But
to prove your point, the last 5 games, he has 10 runs plus RBIs total.
Yeah.
So like that's I mean,
I'm
cherry picking that a little bit, because before that it was not a lot on either one, but it shows that like when they run hot,
with Arizona running hot, like all you need is one of those series to go right for them, and you get a bunch of RBIs or runs and RBIs. So along with some hits, just because he's going to hit for his average floor is pretty good. Right? Like that's kind of just what he is as a player. But when he's running hot, it's a 340 month, like he's been the last 30 days.
Yep. And the average will definitely be there. Also the walk rate, just 7.8% this year. So you're getting a lot of that average. You're not losing it in like traditional 5x5. Same goes for Mason Wynn, who honestly, it's kind of copy paste here. 39% compared to Perdomo's 38%. Past couple weeks, Mason Wynn 373, and he is 1 point higher than Perdomo at a 284 batting average on the season. Wynn is everyday leadoff for the Cards. Walks less than 7% of the time. So again, gets a lot of hits because he's not taking bags on the ABs there. I heard somebody mention a Tim Anderson, and if he can kind of unlock a little bit more power, I think he's like 10-10 this year. But if he can get up to, he's so early in his career, he's an interesting player. In terms of matchups,
I mean, he's like already like one of the best, if not the best
defenders,
defender at shortstop in the league, which is, I know that's more of a real life thing, but hey, that's going to keep him in the lineup. I mean, a 755 OPS for his, what's his full rookie season, set and a 111 WRC plus with that kind of glove. Like I'm sure as a baseball player in the Cardinals organization, they have to be thrilled about him. It's just like a real life player.
There's some shades of Ozzie Smith there, I say, with the number just one number down there, but the defensive
that's a totally unbiased Cardinal fan speaking.
For sure. But just 22 years old, so he definitely made some major strides this year, and he kind of talked the talk in the preseason about how he wasn't worried, and so I love seeing that. But when in terms of helping you, I think it's kind of the same as Perdomo. But his matchups are just, at the Yankees, at the Brewers.
And it's a worse overall offense, right? You don't get the
You're right. You're not getting the counting stats as much, but you are in a better spot in the order.
And for steals, I think it's a better play too overall, if that's sort of a tiebreaker.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that rounds out our average guys, which were Parker Meadows, Yoshida, Geraldo Perdomo, and Mason Wynn. And again, to recap speed there, before that was Pete Crow Armstrong, Jose Caballero, Victor Robles, Josh Lowe, and Dylan Cruz, who can kind of help in different categories. We've got a few more left talking pitchers, but we got to take our second ad break. We'll be right back after this. Okay, so Steve, start us out with some guys who you think can help us with ratios here, because, well, there's probably no saving our Bailey Ober combos, but maybe some of our other listeners could use the ratios help. Yeah, talk to me about where you want to take this one.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to plug Nick's Nick Pollock Pollock's pitcher rank, or the list for the last few weeks, starting this past Monday. The list takes on a new form, and it's not the standard here's the list of the rankings of pitchers. There still is that, but it's basically going through each matchup and deciding which guys you want to start, which guys you want to roster, because even more so than hitters, pitchers become droppable if their next matchups are not ones that you're going to use them. Like, you sometimes use team streamers like Paul Sporer, Fangraphs like to call them, because you want to hold on to a guy until the better matchups come. At this point in the season, there's nothing holding on to him. Like, even if the last matchup of the season is worth it, and there's 3 or 4 bad ones before that, like, you don't want to hold on to that guy. So Nick basically caters the list to, obviously, he takes into account the guy's skills and who the pitcher is, but heavily weights the matchups and does like a rankings list. And it's an amazing resource just to see who guys are facing. And basically for this ratio list, I went through like kind of low rostered 50% or less guys that had really good matchups the rest of the way. Yeah, I think it's a good way to look for some guys that may not be rostered, that you may not want on your team for long, but have some juicy matchups that you can add in favor of like a 4 or 5 starter on your team that, plays at Colorado and then at the Dodgers or something like that.
Yeah. Well, the first one is Ben Lively, who at age 32 is actually putting in a nice season here, 126 innings. The K's haven't been there, but just a 3.62 ERA, a 1.19 WHIP on the year. He's another guy. Extension has been a theme we've talked about this year, but it's 6'9" extension, 88th percentile. And yeah, Lively has Pitt at KC, at the White Sox, Tampa, at St. Louis, and then Houston. But yeah, you will take maybe 5 of those 7 as fantastic matchups, and 51% rostered for Ben Lively. Anything to add there?
I was surprised the rostership was that high, but I guess he's been like kind of like a decent.
He's been solid
/ good player, good pitcher.
And the Guardians tend to get wins as well. So yeah, I think, without having it right in front of me, 11 wins on the season is pretty high, honestly.
For sure.
So yeah, that kind of innings per start is nice. But the next one is a name that's been familiar for WAF all season, has been David Festa. And another guy who's great extension, great swing and miss stuff. Curious, I thought he had some rough matchups, but no, you're right, Steve. At Tampa, at KC,
which is kind of tough. Because at Kansas City and they're good, but still.
But then Cincinnati at home, at the Guardians, which they've been better, and then Miami. So those are decent matchups for Festa. Are you sure he has at Tampa? I swore I just looked. Let me just double check. I thought that he had a different matchup as his next one.
And he kind of shoved tonight versus Atlanta. At Tampa's next start on September 3rd.
Okay, there you go. There you go. Yeah. And like you said tonight, 7 Ks in 6 innings against Atlanta.
And they left him in for the 7th too.
Okay.
And one of those he walked a guy, and then one of those runs came around to score, which was unfortunate.
Yeah, 2 runs came in, but that's now I think like 4 or 5 I guess you could probably say
it was
the
first time he did go more than 5 innings. So keep that in mind. And it was just 88 pitches and 6+ innings, right? And that was the most pitches that he's thrown too. So I would not expect length from Festa, but I would expect, good Ks, low walks, and maybe a decent chance at a win. Though the Twins have kind of squandered their opportunity to pass the Guardians, and the Royals are doing their best to take first place. That they were tied as of yesterday for first. I think they lost today, and the Guardians took that lead back, but still. And just to comment on the Guardians there too, like, they're not the same offense that they were from earlier in the season. So it's not the greatest of starts, but it's not also like one that you want to truly avoid. I think, there's at least 3.5 really good matchups there in at Tampa versus Cincinnati and then versus Miami for David Festa.
Yeah, good points. The Guardians have come back to earth a little bit, minus John Kenzie. Noel has been hot, but the rest of them is kind of cooling off. Last name for ratios we have here, Osvaldo Bido for the Athletics. Man, a very impressive run prevention. Also, just hard hit suppression, I guess you could say. 100th percentile on hard hit rate. Bido, 28 years old. He's a guy that has a 3.21 ERA, a 107 WHIP, and fastball, slider, changeup. Steve, he's another name we haven't talked about much this year. Kind of, solid fastball, really. But you look at some of the other pitches, like the slider doesn't get good swing and miss stuff, but clearly he's in the ratios category here. And 3.21 ERA, 107 WHIP on the season. Looking at the upcoming matchups, he's got Seattle, Detroit, at the White Sox. So you'll take those three. And then Yankees, Texas. A little bit of a banana peel with the Yankees. But, this is an interesting name, too. This is a good list here.
5 pitches that he throws 10% of the time or more. The contact and quality contact suppression is elite. As far as the hard hit, barrel, and average exit velocity that he allows. I know we don't love to look at that
that's
stuff
Ranger
specifically
Suarez
for pitchers,
but
it does seem like a Ranger Suarez, and there's not there's 56 Ks and 56 innings, right? I know that's not eye popping, but pair that contact suppression with decent whiffs and a decent strikeout rate. It's intriguing. The issue is the walks. He does walk 12% of the guys that he faces. So if there is any bit of regression in the quality contact, those could be a few multi-run home runs. But I mean, the xERA is 281. The expected slugging and expected batting average are just super, super low. It's crazy how low those numbers are.
It really
for
is.
Bido. But I mean, it seems like a guy that could take advantage of good matchups. And I want Bido on my team for the next 3 starts versus Seattle, versus Detroit, at Chicago White Sox.
Yeah, those are super soft matchups. Jump into strikeouts. Man, DJ Hers is one that I think, Steve, you were on this one a couple months back. I had a coin flip on adding him or Kramer, and I added Kramer for the Orioles, but I had to watch Hers on Sunday mow down the Braves. And then similarly, he had a great outing. I think it was, did he just have that, or was that, let me pull him up.
I don't know if he started since Sunday.
No, he hasn't. It was before that. He had the Rockies in 7 strikeouts, but he's got the Cubs this Saturday. 3 straight quality starts in a row. Like I said, 15 strikeouts over his last 10 2/3. I like it for a sleeper for next year. He's got the Cubs. And then after that, this year, he's got at Pittsburgh and then home against Miami. So really nice lineup there for Hers, who again, we talked about kind of the game log for him. He's had multiple double-digit strikeout games this season. So yeah, I am interested. Your thoughts on DJ Hers?
It's just crazy how you look at this. Well, I think we've talked about Hers a bunch before, but the walk rates in the minors were just absolutely asinine, like 19% in AAA this year. And the fact that he's got it down to 8.4, like if he keeps it there, like this is a really, really good pitcher going forward. Because he does strike out 30% of the guys and has always had, good strikeout numbers at the minors. I think it's that changeup that is just absolutely insane for him. It's a 26% whiff percentage on the changeup. He's got a whiff percentage of 26 or more on the three pitches that he throws a lot, and the slider, fastball, and change. So it's nice that he has an option for righties in that changeup. Does have that slider too that he goes to lefties when he faces the same-handed pitchers. Yeah, it looks pretty good if that walk rate remains acceptable in the 8 range, because I don't know, Saris of The Athletic talks about it all the time. Like the best pitching development and the reason why teams want to get their players to the majors is at the majors. Like maybe there was something that the team at the major level tweaked to help improve the walk rate. Maybe he was working on something else in the minors, but I don't know. That's sort of hard to believe because basically at every stop he had a walk rate north of 14% throughout the minors. The best one was a 16-inning sample in high A in 2021 where he walked just 9.4% of the guys. But it's funny just looking at his minor league numbers. It's like 40% strikeout rate and 20% walk rate.
Yeah, you never see
at
that.
some stops.
Never
It's
see
crazy. But hey, I mean, he's keeping the walks in line. It is scary. Like that does seem like it's the kind of thing that could lead to like an Ober type of Monday start. Like if he just comes out and walks the first 3 guys, hits a batter, and gives up 2 home runs or something like that. But
yeah.
I don't know. It hasn't really happened. And, that's sort of just kind of like dreaming up a nightmare scenario for her. It's like at this point, he's kind of just striking out a lot of guys and
It's been 14
and
starts.
mowing right along.
Yeah, and just 13% roster to me is crazy, especially when, again, that upcoming lineup, Cubs
Good,
at Pitt,
really good matchups.
those are great matchups. So yeah,
he's kind of been a candidate for someone. I've rostered him in my home league. I think I added and dropped him once, but he's essentially been on my team for I want to say the better part of since the end of July. And I really haven't found a reason to drop him, just whether it be, that start versus Colorado that you wanted, a start versus San Francisco, which actually didn't go too well. But, the St. Louis, Milwaukee, Baltimore start was pretty good. The Colorado start was good, other than, getting Phillied in just going 5.2 innings with 7 Ks rather than the quality start. But he's been good and essentially hasn't given a reason to drop him. And with that schedule, you can't really, and he should be rostered more than 13%.
Yeah. Surprisingly, just for the K's, his teammate Mitchell Parker rostered 17%, so more than him. He has 17 strikeouts over his last 14 innings. Another guy with great extension, good chase rate, and has great swing and miss stuff for his curve, splitter, and slider. Had to throw him on here as well because he also has the Cubs on Sunday and then at Pitt next week. So that's Mitchell Parker as well. And then Steve, round us out with Joe Boyle for strikeouts. I know you've talked about him before. I think he's one that Eno's mentioned maybe. And similar to Hers, right? That he has all the upside in the world, but can he find the zone?
I am such a sucker for Joe Boyle. He just has Lance Brodstowski's wrote about him a bunch. Like he has all the stuff in the world. Like, stuff numbers go burr for Joe Boyle. It just he has the walk rates that DJ Hurst has that just carried over to the majors for Boyle. So Lance Brzezowski did write up, I think, in one of his previous starts in one of his Patreon, one of his Substack releases where he writes up pictures every day. Make sure you subscribe to that. That since he was recalled back in the middle of August or early August, there was a location change that looks like it enabled him to throw some more strikes consistently with the fastball. That being said, there hasn't been a start that in one of the 4 starts that he's came back, or one of the 3 starts that he's come back, that he hasn't walked at least 3 guys. But there's been strikeout note totals of 6, 6, and 8. And like Nick's talked about it in his write-ups, like you kind of just got to gamble that you have the Joe Boyle that throws strikes today. So that makes me want him in the starts versus Seattle, White Sox, and then the last start of the season at Seattle. I will skip the Yankees and Houston start. I could see myself, if I'm desperate, streaming him versus Texas for his next start. But
yeah,
that's Joe Boyle. He's going to get EKs. He's probably going to walk a lot of people.
Yeah, no, it's a good name. Again, starting to fill the rundown for the offseason too on guys that we're watching for one reason or another. We're running a little bit long, but to round out with saves, Manuel Rodriguez, part of the Rays committee, just 3% rostered, but got a save on Tuesday. It's the second one in the past week, and a 2.28 ERA, a 1.08 WHIP on the season. Steve, I think you had Tyler Kinley on here, but he did get roughed up last night.
Yeah, it was a
non-save
non-save situation, I think, but yeah.
Okay.
But still, yeah. I mean, basically anytime that you're super desperate for saves, it's like, who got the most recent save in Colorado? Right.
Yeah. Because they're probably available. Right. Yeah. Ben Joyce, another good one that you had on the list here. He got the last save opportunity, a 2.37 ERA on the season. Good stuff from Ben Joyce. I think he's a good pitcher, and will probably eventually emerge. Right. I don't know if he's.
I think so.
Yeah, he doesn't have the job, but I think he could run away with that.
For sure.
Of course, we got a long offseason ahead. And then did you want to talk about Foley and Hodge, Steve, before we wrap up here?
Detroit's kind of a mess. Like Foley got the most recent save chance. I forget who else has been getting saves in Detroit. I'll look that up real quickly. Peter Hodge also is kind of have a save share in Chicago for the Cubs. But I think there's also been Jorge Lopez who's got some saves there. Tyler Holton's the other guy who's getting saves, who's been pretty good for Detroit. So it's kind of like a 2-man. But Foley's been a lot better after like gaining the role at the start of the season, giving it back, getting it, gaining it again. And all in all, he's got 18 saves in the year. So if you rostered him in like a deeper roto league, like you'll sort of take that as like a third reliever, I guess, overall. But yeah, he's gotten 3 saves since August 15th, compared to Holton's 1. He did have 1 on August 6th, and Holton's kind of been their best reliever. So maybe it's more of like Holton's the fireman, highest leverage reliever sort of situation, and Foley could have that situation back. He is at 48% because he kind of did have that role early in the season. Porter Hodge has been good since being called up and does have quite a few saves, but I think the best one on this list is Manuel Rodriguez. It looks like he's like starting to run away with the role. I thought it was going to be Edwin Usita who got the first save there, but I think Manuel Rodriguez has gotten all of them since. And I know we like to think of the Rays as a committee, but a lot of times they do have sort of one guy.
Fairbanks
that does have the role. Yeah, Fairbanks. I'm trying to think. Whenever Fairbanks was out, it was like Jason Adams.
Yeah,
like he would kind of be the closer when Fairbanks was out. So they kind of do sometimes have just one
like
guy.
a 60-70% of the opportunity.
Yeah, which is pretty good.
It is. Yeah.
So
That's fair.
there's some. I know we always sort of gloss over saves, but I think hopefully we gave you some names, especially with a 3% roster guy, an 8% roster guy in Kinley, and then Porter Hodge at just 18%. So guys that should be out there.
Yep, those are good names for sure. And that is a wrap for the rundown there. So Steve, it was very helpful. I think even I, going through this show, was thinking watch list.
Who am I
I could add
adding?
him for the weekend. What's my matchup doing? And Steve, don't look now, but my matchup, I'm starting to crawl back. I know I got a ton of categories. When I started recording tonight, it was 14-2. Now it's 6-11. So
Okay,
chipping
making your way
away.
back.
How are you
Making your way
doing
back.
over there? Let's hear the quick update.
It's tight. It's tight. It's currently 7-5 me. I'm facing Otani. If I knew he was going to homer, I think his dog ran out the first pitch. Of course, he had a leadoff homer, but it's a super tight matchup. But again, I really dug myself a hole in those ratio numbers with that overstart. So hopefully, got to chip away and really got to pray my offense carries me the rest of the week. But
yeah, Ober.
It's like I said, like I said in the show, like it just becomes a different level during like every at bat. I usually, my mood is dependent on my team, but especially during playoff weeks, it becomes even more so.
Well, let me tell you, Steve, there's not enough. We could do another hour and 11 minutes for me talking about David Bednar, but we're not going to do it. This guy, I had my entire strategy on this Marmol, relief heavy, clean ratio.
Oh yeah, the Marmol strategy.
Thought I had one of the most lights out combinations of closers in just all season with his 5 ERA and his Yahoo pick staring at me. I've had it with Bednar, man. He's blacklisted permanently. But that's a topic for another day, folks. Thank you for joining us on episode 153. Hope this was helpful. Hope you guys sincerely have some good luck go your way in the home stretch here. I know it really is a grind. It's been a long season, but we thank you for being here with us. Again, you guys can subscribe at Wins Above Pod. Go out, give us a rating and review. Otherwise, we just appreciate having you guys tune in. But on behalf of Mr. Steve Gisueli, I'm Van Burnett, and that is episode 153 of Wins Above Fantasy. Thanks for talking baseball with us.
Thanks for listening, guys. Good luck down the stretch.